in the glittering heart of Seoul's Gangnam district, a prestigious nightclub harbored sinister secrets behind its VIP doors. What began as one man's brave stand against injustice would unravel a dark web of corruption, reaching the highest levels of Korean society. Join us for this haunting true crime documentary in today's episode of True Crimes Unfold. Please note that events and scenarios in this video may be graphic for some viewers. Discretion is advised. Details of the videos are taken from actual case files. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're listening from, what type of cases you'd like us to cover next, and we'll make sure to add them to our list. And don't forget to subscribe to get new stories as soon as they're released. Now settle in, get ready, and let's begin. The flames dance across our faces as I lean forward, my voice barely above a whisper. The others gather closer, drawn in by the weight of the story I'm about to share. Behind us, the Seoul skyline glitters like a mirror of the stars above, beautiful yet cold. November in Seoul brings a particular kind of darkness, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you question what lurks in the shadows. I remember the exact moment this case first crossed my desk. 3:27 a.m., November 24th, 2018. The first snowfall of the season was painting Gangnam's streets in deceptive innocence. The burning sun stood like a beacon in the night, its neon signs casting pearl blue shadows across the fresh snow. From the outside, it was everything a high-end nightclub should be. Exclusive, elegant, mysterious. The kind of place where Korea's elite came to play, where K-pop stars might brush shoulders with business tycoons and foreign investors. But beneath that glossy exterior festered something far more sinister. That night, a young man named Kim witnessed something that would crack open this facade. A single moment that would expose the rot at the heart of Seoul's glittering nightlife. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it really began. 6 months earlier, a woman we'll call Min Jung woke up in an unfamiliar hotel room, her vision blurry, her memory a void, the kind of void that feels deliberate, manufactured. The last thing she remembered was accepting a glass of water at the Burning Sun's VIP section. A simple act that would connect her to dozens of other victims, though she didn't know it yet. The club had rules, you see, unwritten rules that the staff called the water protocol. When they spoke about water, they weren't talking about H2O. No, in their coded messages, good water meant something far more valuable to their VIP clients. Something that would make the club millions while destroying countless lives. I pause, watching the fire-cast shadows across my colleagues' faces. They're already hooked, but they don't yet realize this is just the surface. Like the club itself, this story has levels, VIP levels. And what happened in those private rooms? But before I tell you about the VIP rooms, you need to understand the man behind it all. They called him the Great Gatsby of Korea, a K-pop idol turned business mogul who built an empire on the backs of other people's nightmares. His name was Seungri, and his club was about to become the epicenter of one of the biggest scandals in Korean entertainment history. The fire crackles, sending sparks into the night sky. Behind us, Seoul's lights seem dimmer now, as if the city itself is holding its breath, waiting for the rest of the story. The truth about Burning Sun wouldn't just shake the entertainment industry. It would expose a complex web of corruption that reached into the highest levels of Korean society. But on that snowy November night, as Kim stepped into the club, none of that had come to light yet. He was just another patron, unaware that he was walking into the devil's playground. And what he saw that night, well, that's where our story truly begins. The scene is set through rich sensory details and builds tension through strategic reveals. The campfire frame narrative allows for natural pauses and reflection while maintaining an intimate atmosphere. The VIP rooms at Burning Sun weren't just rooms, they were gateways, each one carefully designed with surveillance blind spots, places where cameras couldn't reach. The staff had a special name for these areas: Hong Kong zones. Not because of any connection to the city, but because that's where people would reach their peak. A crude joke that masked something far more sinister. Let me tell you about the merchandisers. In any other club, they'd be the ones keeping track of alcohol inventory, making sure the premium bottles went to the right tables. But at Burning Sun, they were more like curators of human merchandise. They maintained detailed catalogs, not of champagne brands, but of potential victims. Their group chats read like shopping lists from hell. Number one doesn't talk much, loves money. Visuals are great, but not much charisma in drinking scenes. One message read. Number three is bright, fun while drinking. Gets messy when drunk, but has lots of charisma. These weren't drink recommendations. They were human beings being rated and categorized for VIP consumption. The tech employee who discovered these messages, let's call him Park, found himself staring into an abyss of over 200,000 chat logs. A digital paper trail of depravity that implicated some of the biggest names in Korean entertainment. But what made him pause wasn't just the content. It was the casual nature of it all. The way these predators traded photos and videos of their victims like baseball cards. The club had a system of code words. Good water meant attractive women. Side dishes were the ones considered average. When staff texted, "Need zombies in room 3, they weren't talking about Halloween decorations. They were requesting victims who had been drugged to a state of compliance. The clinical efficiency of it all was perhaps the most chilling aspect. But the real horror wasn't in what they said. It was in what they did. Digital breadcrumbs led to hotel rooms above the club, where security cameras mysteriously stopped working at convenient times, where VIP elevators would bypass the main lobby, where women would enter conscious and leave with gaps in their memory that spanned hours. And at the center of it all was the self-styled Great Gatsby himself, a man who had built his reputation on being the life of the party. The same man who would later claim he knew nothing about what happened in his own establishment. But the messages told a different story. One particular message thread exposed the true nature of their operation. A VIP client from overseas was coming to Seoul. The staff was instructed to prepare the right atmosphere. What followed was a meticulous planning session for what amounted to calculated predation. They discussed everything: how to identify vulnerable targets, which staff members would serve doctored drinks, which hotel rooms were reserved. It was coordinated with the precision of a military operation. Because in many ways, that's exactly what it was. A war against innocence. waged from behind the glittering facade of Seoul's most exclusive nightclub. But they made one crucial mistake. They thought their digital tracks would vanish like footprints in snow. They didn't count on someone like Park, meticulously recovering every deleted message, every discarded photo, every cached video, building a case that would eventually bring the whole house of cards tumbling down. The fire has burned lower now, casting more shadows than light, perfect for what comes next. Because this is where the story turns truly dark. I stir the dying embers with a stick, watching sparks spiral up into the darkness. The city lights seem different now, less like stars, more like eyes watching us from the shadows. When Kim stepped in to help that semi-conscious woman that snowy night, he had no idea he was pulling on a thread that would unravel an empire. But sometimes the biggest avalanches start with the smallest stones. The club's security didn't just attack Kim. They performed what could only be called a ritual of humiliation. 3 broken ribs, a concussion. But it wasn't the beating that would haunt him later. It was what happened when the police arrived. Instead of helping the victim of an assault, they arrested Kim. The corruption was so blatant, it was almost beautiful in its audacity. The officers even tripped him as they led him into the station, making sure he fell face first with his hands cuffed behind his back. I pause, letting that image sink in. Someone around the fire mutters a curse. Meanwhile, across the city, our tech employee Park was piecing together something far more sinister. The recovered messages painted a picture of an operation that went far beyond a single nightclub. Police chiefs, politicians, business tycoons, all caught in a web of digital evidence. One message thread stood out. I saw the messages between H and the police chief. They found out who snitched. Another read. Even high-up police commissioners are VIP clients. The rot went all the way to the top. But the most chilling messages weren't about corruption. They were about the victims. The VIPs had a rating system. They shared photos, videos, compared experiences like wine connoisseurs discussing vintages. They called it their catalog. One victim described waking up in a hotel room, feeling like she was underwater. When she tried to move, her limbs wouldn't respond. She could hear voices, laughter, the click of camera shutters, but she couldn't scream, couldn't fight, could only watch as shadows moved around her like sharks circling prey. The club had doctors on standby, not to help victims, but to ensure no one died from overdoses. They had a system for everything. Even the hotel's security cameras would mysteriously malfunction at specific times, specific floors. But the most damning evidence came from the group chats themselves. The casual way they discussed their crimes revealed not just guilt, but pride. They thought they were untouchable, above the law, and for a long time, they were right. Remember the water protocol I mentioned? The staff had a saying, "Good water makes good money." One employee made $88,000 in a single night just for procuring what they called premium water. Let that sink in. But the arrogance would be their downfall. They documented everything, every transaction, every victim, every crime, all preserved in the digital amber of their chat logs. They thought deleting the messages would save them. Instead, it created a perfect record of their atrocities. When the messages finally leaked, it was like watching a nuclear explosion in slow motion. First came the shockwave, the public's initial disbelief, then the fallout. As more victims came forward, more evidence emerged and more names were exposed. The fire was burned down to glowing coals now, casting just enough light to see the horror on my listeners' faces. But what happened next? That's where the story takes its darkest turn. Because when an empire of corruption begins to fall, it doesn't go quietly. And the people at the top? They had everything to lose. The coals pulse red like dying stars as I add another log. Above us, clouds have begun to gather as if nature itself is responding to the darkness of this tale. When an empire built on secrets begins to crumble, the first thing you hear isn't the crash. It's the whispers. The great Gatsby of Korea, our K-pop idol turned nightclub mogul, tried to maintain his facade of innocence. But the digital ghosts wouldn't stay buried. February 26th, 2019. The first wave of messages leaked to the public. What followed wasn't just a scandal. It was an earthquake that shook the foundations of Korean society. Chat rooms full of evidence began surfacing like bodies after a flood. Let me read you one of the messages that brought down an empire. Chairman's guests are coming. We need to set up a separate party. Let's give them back 100 times what we received. Get the kids who give it easily. The response? I'll do the job well. Simple words masking monstrous intentions. The VIP rooms had a hierarchy of horror. Regular clients got what they called normal water. But for the foreign investors, the politicians, the highest paying predators, they had something special, something they called premium water. Each victim carefully selected, photographed, catalogued, like wine in a cellar. The wind carries distant sirens, making everyone shift uncomfortably. When the police finally had to act, not out of justice, but because the evidence was too public to ignore, they found something unexpected. The club's security cameras had caught everything, not just the crimes, but the cover-ups. Officers accepting bribes, politicians being escorted to private elevators, evidence disappearing into pockets. The Great Gatsby's defense crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. I didn't know, he claimed. I was just an idol who lent my name. But the messages told a different story. He was the conductor of this orchestra of corruption, directing every movement, profiting from every crime. His famous friends started falling one by one. JJY, the variety show star with the golden phone full of evidence. Choi Jong-hoon, the clean-cut idol whose messages revealed a monster. Each arrest bringing down another piece of the facade. But here's where justice itself becomes a horror story. The sentences they received? Like slaps on the wrist for crimes that deserved the guillotine. The Great Gatsby himself got just 18 months. Some of his accomplices got less. The wealthy clients. Most vanished like smoke, protected by the same system they had corrupted. Remember Kim? The whistleblower who started it all. They tried to destroy him. Fabricated charges, character assassination, death threats. the system's final act of revenge against someone who dared to expose its rotting core. The club itself was shuttered, its glittering facade now dark. But the horror didn't end there. Because what happens to a system when you expose its corruption but don't fully excise it? It adapts, it evolves, it finds new hunting grounds. But perhaps the most terrifying part of the story isn't what happened inside those VIP rooms. It's not even the corruption that protected it. It's what happened after. Or rather, what didn't happen. Because even now, years later, some of those same predators walk free, their only punishment being a temporary inconvenience to their celebrity status. And somewhere in Seoul's glittering nightscape, behind other velvet ropes and private elevators, in other rooms with conveniently malfunctioning cameras, well, that's where we begin the final chapter of our story. The fire has burned low now, more shadow than light. The rain that started to fall feels like nature's attempt to wash away the filth of the story. But some stains don't wash away. 2 years after the fall of Burning Sun, a woman walks into another high-end club in Gangnam. The name is different, the faces are different, but something feels familiar. The way the staff watch certain patrons, the coded language about water quality, the private elevators leading to hotel rooms above. Let me tell you what happened to our characters. The Great Gatsby, released after just 18 months, was recently spotted in Bali. Not in hiding, not in shame, but partying at luxury resorts, taking the same women to the same restaurants on different days. Like a man who learned nothing except to be more careful about his digital footprint. JGY, the one with the golden phone, got 5 years. 5 years for destroying countless lives. His recent church appearances, crying for his mother like a child, show less remorse than fear of consequences. But what about the victims? Their stories don't end with court verdicts. They carry invisible scars, gaps in memory that feel like wounds. Trust shattered like broken glass. Many never came forward, knowing Korea's justice system might victimize them a second time. The hotel that housed Burning Sun? Sold to Hyundai Construction. They're turning it into luxury apartments, as if new paint and marble countertops can cover the echoes of what happened there. The building stands like a monument to selective memory, Korea's ability to rebuild without reckoning. Remember the water protocol? The code words. They've evolved. In other clubs, in other cities, predators speak a new language. But their intentions remain the same. The system that protected them bent but never broke. I tossed the last log onto the fire, sending sparks swirling up into the rain. The most terrifying part of this story isn't what happened inside Burning Sun. It's what's happening right now, as we sit here. Because systems of power don't surrender their privileges easily. They adapt. They rebranded. They wait. Kim, our whistleblower, still faces harassment. His crime was exposing the ugly truth beneath the glossy surface of Korea's entertainment industry. The message is clear. Speak up, and the system will try to bury you. The final horror of this story is its unfinished nature. The Great Gatsby walks free. Many of his powerful clients were never even named. The police officers who protected them kept their pensions. And somewhere in Seoul tonight, somewhere, another club is offering VIP services. Another young woman is accepting a drink. Another predator is coding messages about water quality. Because the scariest monsters aren't the ones in horror movies. they're the ones who learn from their mistakes, who adapt, who survive. They say the definition of horror is the same thing happening again and again. So ask yourself, when you look at those glittering clubs in Gangnam, at those velvet ropes and private elevators, what do you see? The facade, or what lurks behind it? The fire dies to embers as the rain falls harder. Because the real horror isn't that this happened. It's probably happening right now. And next time, they'll be better at hiding it.